Hey there, welcome back. Be welcome to the second part of the video, Introduction to the Paragraph. As I told you in the previous video, what we're going to do is first to define the paragraph. We have already done that in the first video. Now, in the second part of this video, we're going to take a closer look to those characteristics that make a paragraph effective. Are you ready to start? Okay, so let's get started. Don't hit the stop button. Continue watching. And what you see now is, as I was telling you in the previous video, a definition to the paragraph. But we have already defined the paragraph. And now what we need to do is to refresh these things that we studied previously, which is how is the paragraph organized or developed? Well, when we talk about the paragraph organization and when we need to take into account certain characteristics that will make our writing more effective, we have to think about a paragraph having just one central idea, that is the whole paragraph about. It should also have unity, it should be adequately developed, and it should have coherence and continuity. All right, so as the first point, think of this. The paragraph should contain one central idea only. Why? Because I was telling you, this is just like taking a snapshot with a very small camera. Why? Because the paragraph doesn't give you enough room for you to discuss several subjects, different topics, and having subtopics. Instead, you can take a look at this example. It says, my favorite chair is ugly, but I love it. It is a recliner. Because it is shapeless, heavy, and covered with horrible material, it is an eyesore in my living room. However, it is so comfortable that I would not trade it for the finest piece of furniture I might ever hope to own. There is nothing quite so delightful after a hard day at work as sinking my weary body into that chair, with my back eased into it and my feet eased up from it. I am in heaven. I notice other people like that chair too. Whenever I have company, the first chair everybody heads for is my ugly, lovely recliner. What you see in the example is a description, but it's not a description of the chair itself. Here you see the feelings of the author towards an object. So you said, my favorite chair is ugly, but I love it. And then the writer provides evidence of saying that even though the chair is not attractive, it's not a good thing to the eye, it is absolutely something really comfortable, not only for him, but for other people who have seen the chair. At the beginning, you have a controlling idea that suggests that you will describe or you somehow talk about his favorite chair. But he also implies something in the second part of the topic sentence that he loves the chair. At the end, if you go to the last idea, whenever I have company, the first chair everybody heads for is my ugly, lovely recliner. Somehow, by saying the word lovely and ugly, he's combining the description of this not good to the eye thing, but an object that he has strong feelings for. And you see here, the words that are, well, the sentences that are in blue will suggest the description of it or the backup to the topic sentence. And what is in red is first the topic sentence here, and at the bottom, the concluding sentence. You may pause the video in this section and quite analyze the ideas that the paragraph suggests or how the paragraph is developed following the topic sentence. Now, moving a little bit more into what the paragraph should look, although some of the paragraphs that you may write will probably suggest something like this, so they will look like this. Your aim is to develop your skill in writing so that the paragraph looks more like this, or in some cases like this, more specifically. What do we need to make this close up? Well, it is important to remember, once again, the paragraph should contain one central idea only. Focus your paragraph. First, decide what the center of interest in your paragraph is, and then make sure it is central and unmistakably clear. There shouldn't be two ideas to be explained. There should be one central idea. That's why one of the recommendations for topic sentences is to create a simple sentence instead of a compound sentence. However, a compound sentence can still work, but you have to be careful not to discuss two things, but one. Example of a focus paragraph. My father's face is rough. His complexion is leathery and wrinkled. There are large pores in the skin that covers his nose and cheeks. His nose, broken twice in his life, makes him look like a boxer who has lost too many fights. His mouth, unless he smiles, looks hard and threatening. His chin is massive and angular. Shaved or not, my father's face is rough. What you see in the first and last idea is that the writer is describing physically what his father's face looks like. And in the details that you see in the middle, you will see that he is going over the skin, his complexion. Then he covers this with his skin and pores. Then he moves to the nose, later to his mouth, and finally to his chin. He is using an order that is logical. He wouldn't go to first chin and then eyes and then forehead and then hair. Instead, he's following a logical sequence. And as you see, he's talking about his father's face in both, in the topic sentence and in the concluding sentence. Now, an example of an out of focus paragraph. Take a look at the big difference between the previous and this one example. I want to talk about my father. That's a very poor topic sentence. He is strict with his children, especially me. He won't let me out of the house unless I've done all my homework. He's a tall and rather skinny man. Some people say he is good looking. He has a nice streak of gray in his hair. He laughs a lot and enjoys life. My father is interesting. What do you see in this paragraph that you saw? Well, what do you see here that you didn't see in the other one or the other way around? You can compare both paragraphs and understand that this one doesn't really describe his father. Rather than giving a specific thing about him, it seems to be over general and general and general and general. And instead of having a very strong or captivating or riveting topic sentence, you have some vague idea of what you want to say. And at the end, you see the topic sentence and the concluding sentence are not even related. This paragraph fails to focus upon a particular aspect or make a main point about a subject. It's like trying to photograph the whole neighborhood when you can actually take a photograph of a person or reduce this to the face of a person. So another thing you have to also take into account is that the paragraph should contain unity. The paragraph should contain one piece. When I mean a paragraph, I don't mean blocks of sentences separated one from another. We should have just one thing, as I presented in the previous video, and this one should also have a fundamental purpose. It has to be whole and complete in itself. So when you finish reading the paragraph should be concluded, not just ended. The paragraph should not be or should not need the larger unit to be understood. A paragraph is understood by itself. It cannot be a fragment or something because fragments are incomplete pieces, and it never skips from one subject to another subject. Because if you do that, your paragraph is confusing and you've rather gotten out of focus, and probably you are misleading your discussion to one thing and then another. Now, you see an example here that says, my father is very strict with his children, especially me. He won't let me out of the house unless I've done all my homework. Frankly, I don't care whether I go to school or not. School is such a waste of time. There aren't any good jobs anyway. My mother doesn't agree with my father. They quarrel a lot. Sometimes they wish they would get a divorce, but then who would I live with? Do you think this paragraph has unity? Not, right? This paragraph lacks unity because it skips from subject to subject. Here you see first my father, and then you say, he won't let me out, and then I've done, and then I again. Then you talk about school, then you're talking about jobs, then my mother, then my parents, then I. So it switches from one idea to another because you really haven't gotten the idea well set, or you haven't grounded on what you really want to discuss. So when we talk about paragraphs, we have to take into account they focus on just one main central idea. And second, they should have unity. The paragraph should have coherence and continuity. Why? Because coherence will put together all these pieces to make them logical. The parts of the paragraph should be logically connected. This connection of the parts should be smooth. So one idea should move smoothly to the other one. Like when you're narrating an event, you will go from one idea to another one. Like if you are taking a person to the place where these things happen. If you're describing a person, I will be able to see the picture of the person in my head. And if you are, for example, persuading someone, you will actually get this touch and this smooth movement from one idea to the other one so that you can convince me of what you're saying. Here you see that coherence establishes order and sequence in the paragraph. It depends on the subject, and you hear, for example, when you talk about coherence, as I was telling you, you can talk about people and you describe them from head to toe, or you can describe them from toe to head. It's up to you. If you talk about a house, a building, an apartment, a room you have strong feelings for, you will probably go from bottom up. If you talk about recipes, you will talk about the ingredients first, and then you will end in the oven procedure. Why? Because you're following a logical order. Now, when we talk about continuity, we talk about using transitional words or phrases that can make my sentences be put together and run smoothly and sound smooth and sound good to the ear and look good to the eye. Rules of transitions uh, will come according to what you have studied in punctuation marks. These results, when you talk about transitional expressions or phrases, this will result in these bridges between one idea and the other one that will create a sequence. And the sequence will be clear and will make the paragraph clearer without abusing them. The paragraph is also flowing and easy to read. So when a paragraph is coherent, it is logical. And when it is continuous, it doesn't lack the connection between one idea and another one. And you can see exactly that one idea is related to the next one. You have an example here. It says, to get the most of your textbooks, you should follow several steps very carefully. You should make a survey of each book to get a general idea of what the book contains. You should read for understanding and formulate questions. Make notes of the major points of each chapter. Test yourself to be sure that you can answer questions likely to be raised in class and in examinations. Review your notes and reread any parts of the book that are unclear to you. Can we improve these? We can, absolutely. We can add some continuity so that it sounds even better, more fluent, as I have told you. You may be fluent when you talk, but you can also be fluent when you write. The paragraph should look like this. To get the most of your textbooks, you should follow several steps very carefully. First, you should make a preliminary survey of each book to get a general idea of what the book contains. Second, there should be a comma there, sorry. Second, you should read for understanding and formulate questions as you read. Next, make notes of the major points of each chapter. Then, test yourself to be sure that you can answer questions likely to be raised in class and in examinations. Finally, review your notes and reread any parts of the book that are unclear to you. You see, adding these sequence adverbs, you can really add a sequence that can provide your paragraph with more fluency. And it sounds easier to read. The underlined words that you see there provide transition. They show the relationship between one sentence and thoughts to one another. Also, the paragraph should be adequately developed. What do we mean by these? You should not leave the job half done. Don't just end the paragraph. Complete it. Conclude it itself. Most paragraphs have three basic parts. You know that: a beginning, a middle, a beginning, a middle, and an end. When you have this discussion, we should talk about the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Now, in the introduction, you're talking about the topic sentence of your paragraph. Here you indicate what you will talk about in the paragraph without saying, I'm going to talk about this, okay? That's not an effective way to start a paragraph. Second, your body or discussion. In the discussion, you talk about the topic. You develop your topic sentence. Then in the conclusion, your conclusion is a concluding sentence. You complete your discussion here. Often you refer to the main points stated in the introduction. Sometimes it resembles a summary or a brief restatement of the main ideas of the paragraph. The topic sentence and the concluding sentence are cousins, and even though they are not sisters or twins, they resemble a lot. The first one introduces the description, the narration, the persuasion, the illustration, whatever the style may be, and the last one will conclude the paragraph, not just end the paragraph. When we talk about this, we have to think of this excellent format. The introduction and conclusion are short, while the discussion or body provides the description, provides the whole details, examples, or the ideas that will back up the topic sentence and will develop it completely. Now, having this is incorrect. Having a long introduction and ending with a very short discussion and a very mild conclusion, it's totally wrong. And doing the opposite, having a short introduction, a short body, and having a big conclusion is always incorrect. This applies for speaking and writing, so take into account what you have here. Here you have an example of a poorly proportioned paragraph. I had one of the worst experiences of my life when I witnessed a terrible automobile accident a little over a year ago. I was on my way to a party with my boyfriend. It was about 8 o'clock at night and it was raining. Though we were in a hurry to get to the party, my boyfriend was driving slowly because of the poor visibility. We were happily looking forward to seeing our friends, gossiping about some of them, listening to music on the car radio, and humming some of the tunes. We were stopped for a red light at an intersection where the accident occurred. A car in the lane next to us sped through the red light and crashed into a truck, which was just pulling into the intersection from the cross street. There was a terrible crash of metal, splintering of glass, and screaming and moaning of people. We didn't feel much like going to a party after that. This unexperienced writer provided a very long introduction, but what he or she wanted to say actually about the car accident comes just here in this line. So what happens here is that the paragraph is big enough just to be an introduction, and the discussion is poor and very short, and the conclusion is short too. So what can we do in order to improve this kind of paragraphs? Don't just write more, instead say more in the body of your paragraph. A paragraph should not go on and on. It should go in and in. Why? Because you don't have to add more and more details to make it more general, but you should instead focus on the idea. The best way to develop a paragraph is to be specific rather than general. Why so? Because the narrowed down or limited the paragraph is, the more it must go into detail. The detail that you provide or that develop the topic sentence should be those ideas that will really explain what the topic sentence says. And you will have major and minor supporting details there in the middle. Take As an example, that you will have, for example, a topic sentence that is general, and then you will write things that are more specific and more specific and more specific. The opposite will just create a very poor paragraph that seems out of focus, too general, too broad, and that didn't really discuss anything. Like this example that you saw about my father being too strict, and then talking about my father, my mother, what if they get divorced, etc. This problem results in an overgeneralization of ideas in one paragraph, at the end saying very little or nothing. Now, an example of a paragraph that stands back from what that stand sorry, this is an example of a paragraph that stands back somewhat from its subject. But why does this happen? Mary College should have a new campus. This is essentially the idea that I want to discuss, but here you see the details. There are three major reasons why I believe that a new campus is needed. First, the present campus is badly overcrowded and there is absolutely no space left for additional expansion. Second, the campus is an ugly improvisation of an old high school building and flimsy box-like portables that fail to create a collegiate atmosphere. Third, the equipment in such departments in science, art, and physical education is completely inadequate for the needs of college students. There are other strong arguments for a new campus, but these are three of the most outstanding. Okay, what happens to this paragraph? Although it gives some specifics, it does not go into a great fine detail. Why? Because instead of going in and in, it goes on and on. Can we suggest something better for this? Yes. This one moves a little closer to its subject. Take a look at the pattern. Merritt College is completely overcrowded. That's my problem, that the college is too overcrowded. The lack of space is apparent in all the parts of the campus. The classrooms are so jammed that students feel like sardines, and some of them have to sit on the floor. The library and study rooms are so packed that many students must study in the halls and stairways. The cafeteria is so bulged with bodies that students often go hungry or lose their appetites. Every inch of the campus is so overcrowded that it looks more like a bargain basement than a place for higher learning. Here, what we are describing, what we are talking about, what we are saying is that the campus is completely overcrowded, and we provide examples of what we say. Instead of going on and on, we're going in and providing more specific ideas about what we want to say. It adds more possible and necessary details to it, so it moved a little closer to the subject. Can you make it still closer? Of course you can. And you can see the example here. The cafeteria, so if we go to the very first paragraph, you will see that the problem is that you say Merritt College should have a new campus. But then I move more specifically. Merritt College is completely overcrowded. But now I even take a look that is even closer to this one. And then I say the cafeteria more specifically. The cafeteria at crowded Merritt College is one of the most overworked places on the campus. The service line is frequently so long that a student gives up the idea of eating altogether. If he is patient enough to wait for food, he is lucky if he can find a place to eat before he wears it. If he is particularly agile, he may work his way through the masses to a spot where he can eat before it's cold. Once seated, however, he is likely to find the atmosphere so chocked with other bodies, noise, and dead air that he loses his appetite. He cannot easily slip away at that point either. Wedging his way out of the cafeteria, he discovers is as miserable a matter as working his way in. Even though this paragraph is not the best and does not contain a concluding sentence, Here, the writer moved to a more specific idea, the cafeteria, and then he exemplifies what happens in the cafeteria. So he developed his topic sentence. Because it narrows down or limits the subject further, it must discuss the subject in a greater detail. Because he specified more and more. So the specifics were explaining the topic sentence. Understood? I hope you understood it. Remember, indentation is important. Indent your paragraph only once in the first sentence. The paragraph should not be neither short or so long. Make it approximately 5 to 10 or even 12 sentences length or idea so that you can completely develop your topics in. Focus and narrow or organize your paragraph carefully. Organization is really important. And narrowing your topic can really make a paragraph be something complete, something independent from other texts, and something worth reading. Only one central idea. It should have unity, coherence, continuity, and be adequately developed. The closer means the narrower. If you move closer into a subject, limit the paragraph more. The narrower, the more detailed. If the paragraph is more narrow, it must go into detail more and more. Do you have any questions about this explanation about the most important characteristics of paragraph writing? Any questions, you know where to find me. If not, leave your comments here and I will gladly accept your requests for more explanations in the next videos. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.